Welcome to In Your Neighborhood. I'm your host, Charlotte Brown, and on today's show, we are talking with Shelterhouse. My guest today is Gary Mack. Gary is the Executive Director of Shelterhouse. How are you today, Gary?
I'm great, Charlotte. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being on the show today. So can you tell me a little bit about what Shelterhouse is and maybe a little bit about the history of it in our city?
Sure. Well, Shelterhouse is a homeless shelter. It's the largest homeless shelter in northwestern Ontario. We are a low barrier shelter, which means that we will house people who are intoxicated. We have beds. Originally, our building was built 10 years ago, and it was originally built to house 42 people. We have about 60-something staying with us every night. So our dorms are full. We have people sleeping in our lobby, people sleeping in our clinic room, people sleeping in our resource room. I guess 10 years ago, they thought 42 beds would be enough for the homeless situation in Thunder Bay, but homelessness has really grown over the years. Our organization started about 35 years ago, actually, and it started out, I'm just learning the history right now, but it started out as a temporary, like it was a seasonal shelter that only operated at night. So it was a winter time and at night. And now we are obviously expanded to be 365 days a year. We have a whole bunch of different services, and we really try to make things better for the homeless population in Thunder Bay.
And let's talk a little bit about those numbers and maybe why those numbers are growing.
Yeah, well, I mean, they definitely are growing. Homelessness really is a major issue in Thunder Bay. They're growing for a number of reasons, and we did a point-in-time count this year where we asked people to come out and identify themselves as homeless, and we had 289 people. Many of those people were not known to shelters. We'd never seen them before. They were people that were couch surfing. They were people that were staying in other circumstances, and it was a cold January day, so I think that that's an underrepresentation of people who are actually homeless in our city. They identified reasons such as substance use or mental health issues, or maybe they had a relationship that just ended, and they found themselves homeless. But really, homelessness it's a social issue. It's a structural issue. It's really, to my mind, based on how poor we keep our poor people in this country, you know? And so people that are trying to get by on social assistance, when you're that poor and then you have perhaps substance use issues or you have mental health issues that then become exacerbated because of the poverty that you find yourself in and that stress, it's very easy to see how people can find themselves homeless. The other issue too is a lack of housing. So there is a real lack of housing for people. There's the process for getting onto subsidized housing or finding housing is quite daunting for many people. And there's also the issue for us in Thunder Bay in particular of people from Northern Reserve communities coming into Thunder Bay, and there not being services or adequate services to connect those people with housing and supports in the community. So it really is quite a complex issue.
Right, and even for subsidized housing, there can be quite a significant wait to even a year or even more sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is too, for many of our residents, they would need to be in a supportive environment. So these are people with, significant substance use issues, mental health issues, living with a lot of unresolved trauma issues. And so for them, they really need to be in an environment that's supported and supervised and that provides the kind of support that they need to be successable.
Right, so even if we could snap our fingers and create all these homes, that's not necessarily the right solution.
No, I mean, I think that almost everybody is housable, and my goal is that one day we don't even need to have a shelter in Thunder Bay, that people will just be housed. But for what that housing looks like for each person is individual.
Right, for sure. So how do you manage if you have a shelter that was built for, to house 40-some people, and what's kind of the average that's staying there each night, and how do you accommodate all that?
Well, like I said, we have people in our lobby, we have people in our resource room, in our clinic room, but also we have a good relationship with the Salvation Army. So the Salvation Army is a shelter for men only, and it is a sobriety-based shelter. So when we have people that are not intoxicated at Shelterhouse, we use our SOS team, which is a street outreach service with a van, to transport our sober people over to Salvation Army when they have room, and then we can take in more people. We do whatever we can. I mean, we're not going to let anybody not be sheltered. Do you know what I mean? So we will make room. But I mean, we do have a fire code to follow as well.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. And I mean, our winters are brutal, you know, like for sure. And let's talk a little bit about maybe some statistics in terms of how many men, how many women, youth homelessness is something that's also, I believe, is growing in our community.
So if you look like 15 years ago, homelessness was older white men in Thunder Bay. That was the population. And so it has changed greatly. So our shelter was built with 10 beds for females, 5 for female youth, 5 for female adults. And we have, the numbers now are now more like, it's probably a third female and 2/3 male. And as for youth, we do have growing numbers of youth, absolutely. I'm not quite sure what those numbers are. And a lot of youth are the hidden homeless. They are people, you know, youth can kind of sometimes find a place to stay, right? They're staying at someone's folks' house. They're figuring it out somehow. So we're not seeing them in the numbers that I would have actually anticipated.
Right. So if you were to kind of, I know you have some rough idea from the survey and stuff that was taken, but where do you feel like those numbers would be realistically? Do you have an idea?
Well, I would say probably we have more like 400, I would say, homeless people in Thunder Bay. It could be more. We have one of the highest rates in the country, for sure.
Right. So overall, how do you feel like things are going over at Shelterhouse?
I think they're going really great. When I started there, one of my goals was to really create opportunities to get our residents involved, to help them to feel better, and to give them opportunities to remember and to learn new skills that they maybe didn't even remember that they had. And so we did things like how we have a community garden. So this year, about 20 of our residents, plus some volunteers, planted a garden. They tended it over the summer. This fall, we harvested the produce from it, and that was served in our kitchen. That was really amazing. We did a great big mural project this year where we had an artist come in, and she worked with our residents, and they talked about what gives them hope and strength and resiliency. And she created a 4-meter mural inside the shelter, and then our residents spent 2 weeks painting it, and it's gorgeous, and it provided a nice diversion for people. So what would happen is someone would come up to them and say, hey, would you want to go out drinking or whatever? And they would say, no, I'm working on this mural right now, I'm doing this. So it shows me that when you provide opportunities for people to get involved, that they will get involved and do that. We had a street party this summer where we blocked off George Street, and we had a barbecue, and we had clowns and a bouncy castle and dunk tank and that kind of thing. And our residents helped to plan that event, and they hosted it for the public to come. And the look of pride on our residents' faces, and it was cool because we all just had black Shelterhouse t-shirts on, so you couldn't really tell who was a staff, who was a resident, who was volunteering, and it was amazing to see them so proud and happy. We've also been incorporating more Indigenous cultural events as well. We had a healing ceremony. We've lost a number of people, probably close to maybe 29 people that have been known to Shelterhouse have died in the past 2 years. And so our residents in working with some elders and some other volunteers, had a healing ceremony at the shelter. We had a grandfather drum and singing and dancing, and a fire where people would place tobacco and messages that they had written to people that had passed. And our residents helped to plan that too, and it was a real day of healing for our whole organization. So for me, it's about getting our folks involved in as many ways as we can so that people can start to feel better about themselves, because when you just start to feel a little bit better, your whole world changes, So we have people helping us with chores. When we do job interviews, we have our residents sit in on that interview to give feedback. We have a council of residents now that talk about issues within the shelter, that kind of thing. So we're just really working to expand that part. So we're still, I mean, we're providing shelter, we're providing an amazing number of meals every day. But in addition to that, we just want to add this extra piece to help move people along.
Wonderful. Well, it's just like all of us, right? We want to feel purposeful.
Yeah, for sure.
Know,
We
and
all need a purpose.
that we're important, that our lives are relevant, that we can all contribute.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely beautiful what you're doing there.
Oh, thank you. We're also trying to break down this barrier because homeless people are ostracized, and oftentimes the general public, we don't maybe feel comfortable around homeless people. To start to break down these barriers, by having the party, by inviting. So when we had our community garden, people would come with their children in the evening to tend to the garden, and then they'd be engaging with our residents who are also there doing the same thing. It just creates this nice opportunity for everyone to learn from each other.
That's right. Spark a conversation for sure.
Yeah.
You'll find out you have more in common than you have different. For
Absolutely.
Sure. Wonderful. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Gary and talk more about Shelterhouse.